That's where the debate is. It's about the pace. And if you pick 10 environmental experts and put them in a panel, from Bill Gates to Greta Thunberg to whoever, they would all say, we're going in the right direction, we're just not doing it quickly enough. So I think it's important to make that point. We're not debating the trajectory, we're debating the speed along that curve.
I'd like to welcome you to another Making IT Happen Sims podcast, and again, delighted to be joined by Roger Whittle, the CEO at Jigsaw24, based up in Nottingham, and Matt Morris, who works with us at Sims, overall guiding our net zero goal that we're trying to achieve. So good to see you both.
Good morning.
Morning.
So I think it's about a year since we last spoke. Much has happened in the world since then. The ghastly wars in Ukraine and Israel, but linked back home, I think. In fact, we were talking about this earlier, where we as a country are on the journey to the ambitious plans that were outlined earlier. Do we think there's a slight lessening of an enthusiasm to get to carbon neutral globally? Roger, what are your thoughts?
I don't think there's a lessening of enthusiasm. I think that people are very, very worried about the day-to-day. Economics obviously focuses everyone's minds first and foremost. If you haven't got enough money to meet your bills, if you are an individual or a family or a company, or dare I even say a country, sometimes these so-called conceptual aspirations, although I think it's a lot more than a conceptual aspiration when you see what's happening to floods or to droughts, tend to go to the background. People are worried about all sorts of other things at the moment. And the politicians in various countries are also worried about the short-term opinion polls and so on. And, there is no doubt that we need a considerable amount of investment to, and slightly more of a long-term view maybe, or medium-term view, to make our net zero ambitions work. And so when you're faced with an acute economic crisis and your mortgage rates have doubled or your energy bills have doubled, oh, the irony, why the energy bills doubled, but we can get onto that. It isn't just the war in Ukraine, it's because we haven't been investing enough in alternative sources. I can see why people are worried. So, but I don't think there's a lessening of enthusiasm. I think people are just worried about the economy.
Yeah. And Matthew, your views, you align very much with Roger's saying. Anything you'd like to add?
Well, I think I despite the current background and what's going on around the world, I'm still remain positive about the developments that are being made with regard to the rollout and the implementation of renewable energy sources, the investments that are being made, and the good progress basically that's being made towards net zero. I mean, I think some of the achievements don't really get enough recognition or enough coverage. I think there are improvements to be made, but generally speaking, I generally remain sort of positive about what's happening so far. I think it's there is some room for optimism in what's going on with regards to renewable energy and sustainability.
Yeah, and I think certainly bringing it relevant to this podcast, that optimism and enthusiasm very much at Sims. And again, since our last podcast, are you happy to update listeners on the various activities that we've invested in the last 12 months?
Yes, so the solar PV array at Sims is almost a year old now. It's been generating as predicted. The forecast was accurate, and we're tracking the performance regularly. At points during the summer, Sims was effectively off-grid. It was operating only from electricity generated from the roof, which is pretty amazing. And the self-sufficiency has been as high as, I think, just over 70%, Obviously, that varies according to the time of year, but certainly Sims is on track to generate 100%, if not more, of its annual electricity demand from its rooftop now, which is great news. We then moved on to completing a set of electric vehicle charging points. I think there's a total of, it's a 9, as there was 2 existing, so I think there's 9 in total now. And last time I went to the car park, I was pleased to see several battery electric vehicles plugged in and happily charging away. And I think I know that the company has been supporting staff with salary sacrifice scheme. I think that's right, isn't it? That staff are being supported to purchase their sort of commuting vehicle, the battery electric vehicle. So I think generally feedback's good. Certainly they're being starting to be used more so. And every time I head up to Lenham, there's more questions about vehicles and whether they're the right thing to do and what their pros and cons are, which is always a good discussion to have with people. And more recently, we've moved on to the installation of the air source heat pump. So this is a 16 kilowatt unit that is being commissioned and fine-tuned at the moment, but effectively the gas boiler has been taken out, has been decommissioned and will be removed, and the gas supply will be capped. So effectively, Sims now is no longer reliant on fossil gas for heating. So those are the 3 sort of bits of technology that have happened over the last 12 months. The other important piece of information really is the purchase of an arable plot within Kent, quite local to the business, to Sims, where a biodiversity net gain project is being planned. We've had several conversations with potential partners on that one. And essentially, it's a rewilding project linked to biodiversity net gain, which is a developer-led scheme for offsetting biodiversity loss. And it has the potential to produce a carbon offset that can be used by Sims to deal with Scope 3 emissions, for example. So essentially, we're dealing very strongly with Scope 1 and 2 with the technology that I just described, and Scope 3 greenhouse gas emissions will be dealt with by the the biodiversity net gain project. So in total, there's 4 quite significant things that have happened over the last 12 months, and there's more work to do, but it's looking very strong at the moment.
Yeah, no, thank you, Matt. Thanks for outlining that. And Roger, with Jigsaw 24, I know EV chargers are very prominent at your offices. Anything else that you're working on or planning in the next couple of years?
I mean, first of all, congratulations to Sims, because those are some fantastic moves. So you are generating nearly all of your electricity. You're actually generating it, which we're not yet. And you've cut off gas. I assume you were never on coal or oil. So you're fossil fuel free now.
Yeah.
Quite hard to say that after 14 gin and tonics. But it's only in the morning. I haven't had any gin and tonics yet. So you're fossil fuel free. You're generating power. You're using it in an efficient way with a heat pump. You're charging your cars. And then you've got a fantastic commitment to nature action as well. I know that there can be controversy about using land to offset, but you're just doing the right thing. And that's the way I always approach it. Planting trees is the right thing to do, full stop. It's just the right thing to do. There is nothing to say now. Whether or not you choose afterwards to argue that that's do anything on the offsetting side is a secondary point. The most important point is to look after nature. And that land that you've bought is not going to be filled with concrete or a factory or a coal-fired power station. It's going to be filled with biodiversity, which is going to be helping the environment. So, congratulations to Sims. Jigsaw 24, we're also gas-free. Obviously, no oil or coal as well. We've upgraded some of our properties this year and moved around, and we acquired a small business. So basically, all our properties are, interestingly, the electricity comes from different providers, but it's all REGO backed, REGO, which is the government scheme to show that we're getting all of our power from sustainable sources. The electric car project goes from strength to strength. We've had about a quarter of our employees lease an electric car, charge stations in all our offices. And we've done a really, really, really good job now at calculating our carbon footprint in some considerable detail. And we're at the largest B2B Apple dealership in the country, so Apple's very important to us. So we're also carefully watching all of the carbon footprint that is involved with the machine, the devices that we sell. We sell about 150,000 devices a year. And apart from AirPods, which is still a key emission, Apple now do give the global carbon footprint of their products, of all of them. This is according to ISO 14040 and 14044. The controversy on the watch is that they've got the footprint down to between, depending on the model, 7 and 12 kilos per watch, which is an absolutely astounding achievement. And that is very for the ISO. The controversy then starts with Apple are now declaring that certain of those watches are carbon neutral, which is their wording, is not backed by the ISO, because they are claiming that they have highly responsible offsetting projects, nature-based, which are able to take that 7 to 12 kilos down to zero. That is the bit which is in doubt. The important point to emphasize, though, is that the watch is only 7 to 12 kilos in the first place. And there was a time when watches, I mean, Apple's laptops now are of the order of in the high 100s of kilos. They were 500 kilos. So they've made huge progress, but it's that last bit. And can you achieve that through offsets? Or should you be doing those nature plans anyway and not calling them offsets? That's where the debate is.
Yeah. And Roger, both our businesses operate in the channel, and a lot of our listeners will be people from the channel. So if you look at the two ends of the channel, the designer or the vendor, as we call them, i.e. Apple, and then look at our customers who are using the products, are you seeing greater emphasis on both sides wanting to ensure that the channel is looking and taking, net zero seriously?
Absolutely. I'm more interested in the customers, the end user customers, really. They are all asking about it now. They're very interested. As soon as I finish this podcast, I'm going downstairs to present to a group of customers who are here today about this very topic. Customers are very, very, very interested in it. They feel it's important to get involved and to be seen to be working with sustainable suppliers, selling in a responsible and sustainable way. You could be cynical about the vendors and saying they're trying to do this in terms of reputation management. But in a sense, we all are in the business of reputation management, aren't we? If you actually boil it down and are very blunt about everything and why we're here. Pride is meant to be one of the 7 deadly sins, but I think we all suffer from it. And that's not necessarily a negative driver. So we all want to look to be doing the right things. But I see progress with the suppliers. I think Tech Data are a very responsible distributor. They're doing a particularly good job. Sims are obviously doing an outstanding job. So I think there is absolute momentum. And if sometimes some of the momentum will temporarily slow because of more acute short-term economic pressures, that is to be understood. And let's hope we can get through those. I heard the Bank of England yesterday talking about interest rates being cut. I've never heard them mention that at all this year. And they're now talking about them being cut next year, in the middle of next year, maybe earlier. So maybe there are green shoots to come, green being the emphasis then.
Yeah, no, very much so. And Matt, obviously the benefit of having you on the podcast is, you work very closely and been a big part of Sims's journey, but outside IT channel where we operate in the other businesses you look at, same question. Are you seeing enthusiasm or companies prepared to make that investment because they believe not just it's the right thing to do from almost a moral point of view, but from a business point of view, they just need to be doing it?
I mean, I tend to operate in the sustainability sector anyway, so I tend to get I'm slightly biased towards companies that want to take action, of which Sims is a great example. But even those that aren't really are potentially doing it more for reasons where they've got to compete within tender situations, for example, where they have those traditionally it's just been social value and corporate social responsibility questions. We're beginning to see greenhouse gas carbon footprint questions coming into tender questions. So even companies that haven't historically really paid too much attention to this topic are one way or the other now having to pay attention to it. And that's always quite an interesting type of work for me, where people the carbon footprint is revealed to them and they can suddenly see where the carbon emissions lie within their business. And typically it's usually a lot of diesel vehicles and a lot of supply chain stuff. So scope 3, for example. So I was in an office yesterday that was being audited by a government person to look at their environmental and sustainability activity, and that's happening on a 6-monthly basis. So that's quite a large, that's a very big organisation, large budget, and I was quite encouraged to see that there's a continued focus on carbon footprinting, for example, sustainability strategies, the implementation of a strategy and associated action plans and that kind of thing. I think, as Roger said, I think there is still the risk of people talking about this topic and not actually really doing anything is still, very much there. But I think, generally speaking, the direction of travel is towards sustainability rather than away from it. So in the sort of years that I've been doing this type of work, it's certainly the whole dialogue around this, the conversations around this, people's understanding, people's awareness is so much better than it used to be. So yeah, I think the trend is towards sustainability now, rather than away from it, or rather than just simply ignoring it.
Okay. And moving forwards, it's likely that we're going to have a general election in 24, or at the latest January 25, and then further forward is the next COP. This clearly isn't a political broadcast, but do we all think that the parties in how they go to the country and what they be, I guess, talking about and hoping to get our votes, there will be a strong element of what they will be doing environmentally? Roger?
I think there will be. Clearly, Labour and Liberal Democrats seem to be more aligned with the environment. Sir Ed Davey, leader of the Liberal Democrats, was, of course, Secretary of State for the Environment for 5 years in the Conservative Liberal Democrat coalition. Seems a long time ago, 2010 to 15.
Yep.
If the wind turbines we have now working are because of the policies that he enacted. The question mark will be how much the Conservatives want to put this environmental push to the fore or not. I thought yesterday was very interesting. If I lived in Scunthorpe when my mother was born, actually, I would be very depressed and upset at the prospect of job losses. Of course, that's tragic. But the statement that was made was that basically the furnaces, which formerly were powered by coal, are now going to be replaced with electric furnaces. We're in the teeth of all but a recession. And yet it was made clear that the world steel industry needs to move forward with these new technologies. And that was described as the driving force because of the law, because of the net zero legal commitment that the government has made. And that's a decision that was made to move to these new furnaces, which are going to unfortunately need less jobs, which is tragic, but will be using or having a far lower carbon footprint, which of course is good. So there we saw something very interesting. It's a key moment when there is economic vulnerability, and yet not only in a sustainable imperative, but actually, because we have signed up to this, a legal imperative. And what we're all arguing about or debating about next year in the general election as citizens of our precious democracy is probably about pace. I don't think anyone is saying that net zero is a bad thing. Everyone has agreed it's 2050 at the latest. The question is, how much of towards that 2050 progress do we need to make voluntarily or on a mandated basis by 2030? That's where the debate is. It's about the pace. And if you pick 10 environmental experts and put them in a panel from Bill Gates to Greta Thunberg to whoever, they would all say, we're going in the right direction. We're just not doing it quickly enough. So I think it's important to make that point. We're not debating the trajectory. We're debating the speed along that curve.
Yeah, that's no, I totally agree with that. I think that's actually a very good way of putting it. It is actually about the pace.
I think we're too far behind, but we're getting the right direction.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be clear, and Elon Musk said this, who sells nothing but electric vehicles. The world would collapse tomorrow, and we would all start to die if we had no fossil fuels. We need fossil fuels just to survive. The question is, and I hate fossil fuels, the question is, we've got to be superbly pragmatic and get ourselves off this drug of fossil fuels as quickly as we can, hopefully treating it as an economic opportunity as well as a moral imperative. But, it is a period of transition. I'd like us to accelerate through that transition as quickly as we can. And the answer, of course, is we will do it as quickly as we can afford it. And as being blunt, in all the countries who all have elections next year. By the way, Rishi did say on his interview last week, it will be in 24. He actually admitted that.
Okay.
So the parties are all under pressure in that sense. We'll get to COP28 later on. I think you're going to talk about that.
Yeah. Matthew, your view, looking at how the election will unfold and how the parties, as I said, it's not about which is the party that's going to represent the environment the best, but do you think it'll be high up on the agenda, and do you think the country will incorporate it into where they put their X in the box to what their plans are environmentally?
Well, I mean, as Roger said, this is an economic opportunity, and the Stern report in 2006, wasn't it, said just that. And yes, we need to move more quickly. So I think in economic terms, I think there is certainly maybe some election noise around that topic. And I think, the left and the right are quite, they converge on sustainability and environmental topics. There's actually not a lot between them, to be honest. And I think the voting public, when it comes to voting, will tend to sort of vote very much alongside their sort of perception of the government rather than reality. I think there are quite a lot of good things happening still. Renewable energy production remains high, capacity is increasing. Where the rate of solar PV installation is at its highest since 2017, and that's in a subsidy-free environment. The boiler upgrade scheme, whilst only 25,000 grants so far, I think with the recent increase from £5,000 to £7,500 per technology will certainly make that accelerate. And I hear about projects, large solar PV projects, even one locally to us. So there's still quite a lot of investment to be had, I think, from renewable energy. So certainly, I think it has a massive economic potential still. All governments of all colours have referred to green jobs and how many there could be. None of those governments have really truly delivered on that sort of ambition. Yes, there are more green jobs to be had, and I really do hope that a government of any flavour can actually turn that into a reality. But certainly, in terms of the voting public, I think they'll think about their pocket, as Roger described. I think they think about their cars. the cost of driving to work, the cost of shopping. I think the cost of living issue will probably feature quite well. But yes, after, was it 13 years? 14, it'll be 14 years, won't it? After 14 years, I think change is almost inevitable. And let's hope the next government picks this up and carries on. And I think there's an awful lot of good stuff for them to pick up and carry on with, and hopefully make it even better.
Yeah. I guess a quick one on, let's say, the millennials who'll be voting for the first time. Do you think that generation see and put greater importance on the environment than, say, our generation?
I think yes and no. I mean, I think yes, in the sense that they probably have a far greater awareness of the issues, but perhaps no, in the sense that does that mean they take the same or more action? I mean, I'm aware that, just take a simple topic like recycling, it's the older generations who actually recycle the most, and they're perhaps more sustainable in the way they conduct their lives and their household. So there's a real stark contradiction in sort of outward appearance and actual activity.
Yeah.
But that's an opportunity. I think, certainly the education around the environment has increased and improved, beyond, it's massively better. That has led, of course, to a lot of activism as well, which is no bad thing as long as it's done in a sensible way. So yes, I think the millennials will probably be voting for the greenest government if they vote, because we know that the millennials think very differently to us, and it's not always easy to predict what they'll do next.
Yeah, no. Roger, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm more optimistic. I think younger people really do care about it. I hear you about possible low turnouts. I understand that. And sometimes younger people can be maybe a bit selfish when they don't think about putting things in the right bins or whatever. I do hear you there. But on the whole, I think that on the whole, I think that views have changed, and I believe they think that sustainability is very much at the centre now. I remain optimistic there.
Okay. And without putting you both on the spot, but to sort of end with, if we'll start with you, Roger, if you were doing the introductory speech to open the next COP, what would be your rallying call to your audience and indeed the world or whoever's listening?
Well, it's a rallying call and a wish. Do you know what I would want to do? This whole concept of poacher turned gamekeeper and make the bad boy or the bad girl the prefect. I think the most important thing about COP, which obviously stands for the United Nations Conference of the Parties, and we're now on COP28, which is opening on the 30th of November. The famous one in Britain was COP26, which was held in Britain, as you know, in Glasgow. And then COP27 was held in Egypt. They have a sort of rotation thing, a la United Nations. COP28 has controversially been held in the United Arab Emirates. And therefore, they are allowed to appoint the chairman of COP, and they've appointed the chief executive of the state-owned oil company. At which point, you might want to put your head in your hands and think, this is the equivalent of appointing a CEO of a cigarette company to oversee a conference on cancer cures, some campaign groups have said. Or is it? Should we try and be counterintuitive here? So in answer to your question, what I would say is I want COP29 to be held in China. I would go straight for the bullseye. That's what I want. Now, people don't know this, but the Biodiversity Conference, which is a sort of offshoot cousin of COP, held by the United Nations, most recently, and these things drag on, this was held for about 6 months in Kunming in China. China made such a huge effort about this. There was more achieved in that than ever, because they wanted to show China in a good light, in a position of diplomatic strength, again, reputational impact being watched here, and national pride, and they did a really good job. And the whole point about worldwide global emissions is China and America. Most important thing that Joe Biden did was he appointed John Kerry to a new role, which is similar in status to Secretary of State. Anthony Blinken does the normal foreign secretary stuff, and of course he's very busy at the moment in the Middle East. But John Kerry spends half his time in China, because if the US and China do not get their act together on global emissions, we've got no chance. And the answer is they've been talking all the time, and there's about 20 committees all set up, and they're working all the time. So I would want to leap on top of this now and make COP29 held. They're saying it's going to be in Eastern Europe, and I'm thinking, why? Because political correctness says that's where the next rotation should be. I would hold it in China, because then China will want to make it a success. And they're about to turn off this Christmas new coal-fired power stations. Do you think that's too long? They're still opening new coal-fired power stations even now in November. But at Christmas, they stop. And from next year, they're not going to be coal-fired anymore, the new power stations. And that's what we want. And I think if we can get China running the COP, that's what I would want, because I think then they will want to make a special effort to make it a success.
Okay. Matt, so your view about COP29 being in China and your rallying call or wishes that you would share if you were opening the next COP?
Well, COP29 in China, I think that would be a brilliant thing for all the reasons that Roger said. I think that would be a very good thing. I actually don't know where COP29 will be.
Saying Eastern Europe.
Sorry, Roger?
They're saying an unspecified country to be decided this year, but it will be in Eastern Europe because it's Eastern Europe's turn.
Okay, well, if it was Poland, then I'd say the same message that you said about coal power stations, because Poland is very reliant on coal still for its electricity production. So that's a big issue for them. But coming back to COP28, I mean, I can see in the agenda, there's a lot to do with finance, trade, accountability. That's December 4th. December 6th, we got transport is going to be discussed and what have you. So I think my rallying call would be for COP28 to focus back onto really the opportunities to decarbonise transportation more quickly, which is one of the most sort of recalcitrant parts of any country's carbon footprint. So we're hearing quite a lot about sustainable aviation fuel at the moment, and the first SAF flight will take place shortly. I think this month or next month, so that's going to be quite interesting. And I think really I would like the emphasis on accountability to be made more strong. And I believe the UK government is consulting at the moment on Scope 3 emissions and how they are accounted and reported. So I certainly think this kind of reinforce the emphasis that more businesses need to take action. And it's not just down to, households, individuals, where I believe individuals and households are already acting, generally speaking, in a very sustainable way. We've got to get the focus back onto businesses. You only have to walk around central London on a cold winter's evening to see how many office lights are just left on all the time or for a lot of the time. So, yeah, I think I'd go back to accountability as my rallying call.
Okay. Well, thanks, gents, for your time as always. Really, really interesting discussion. And yeah, it's kind of encouraging, at least in our little world. Roger's off now to meet customers and talk about all things environmental. And you, Matt, and you and myself meeting about our piece of land over in Shotton in Kent. So it's good that our typical day is still spent thinking about the environment. But thank you so much, and thank you to all those who've listened to this. And let's hope COP29 actually does happen in China. I agree. What a great way to end this podcast. Thanks so much.